Jonathan Lewis in Poland at POUG. We are really honored to have you here, Jonathan, and really thank you for agreeing to coming to us. Yes, well, everyone knows you. Jonathan is Oracle legend.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying so. I'm very happy to be here, by the way, but yes, yeah.
I can't remember how many times I was talking on my trainings to people that they should go to your blog and read your books and so on and so on and so on. And then you are finally here. I think you told me this is your first time in Poland?
Well, it's the first time in Krakow.
In Krakow.
Yeah, I think I've been to Poland twice before, but that would have been Warsaw on both occasions, visiting the Oracle offices or something like that. But yes, I get a bit vague about where I've been and how often over the last 25 years, I guess it would be. I've been to rather too many places. You know.
I can imagine, yeah.
So, yes, yeah. No, I've definitely started. I keep telling people I'm cutting back on this travel. I'm not going to go to so many places. So I've got 3 different countries in 3 weeks now. So I'm here in Poland this week. I'm in Slovenia next week and Switzerland the week after that. And I insist on not traveling so much as I used to. But yes, very nice to be in Poland. Very nice, particularly to be in Krakow and not Warsaw. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that was the case. Last year we did a conference in Warsaw, but this was the first conference. We didn't know how it will be with costs and everything.
Yeah.
But this time we went big.
Right.
And
it's a very impressive number of people you've got here, I thought.
206.
Mm-hmm. And you've only been here, saying you've only been running a few years, so to have
started 2 years ago.
2 years, that recently, right? So
this is second international one.
Yeah. So it's a really good turnout for such a young user group, I think.
Yes, well, yes, it is, but it is because of speakers like you, because we gathered here, all the top level speakers,
right? Yes.
And ACE directors, Octable members, and just people you see out there in blogs and books, and your presence here is also getting a lot of people. So actually, we're very thankful that you are here. Because of you, we have so many people.
That's a terrible reputation I have to live up to, though. I think I do hope I don't disappoint when I do my little thing tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, what is your little thing tomorrow?
It's something I've just titled "Just Don't Do It," and it's really a number of examples of either things which have been done very badly and wasted a lot of effort. Or things which have been done in a straightforward way when, with perhaps a little extra thought or a little inventiveness, one can bypass what is a necessary type of problem and do something which is much more efficient, but definitely counterintuitive. So, for example, one of the cases comes up with, I've got to do this table join and it's absolutely enormous and messy. But actually, if I take one of those tables and pre-process it once and then join to it a second time, joining the table to itself actually makes the query faster than joining straight to the table. So odd things can happen when you start looking at what you're actually trying to achieve in the business. What the meaning of the data is, as well as what the pattern is, and how perhaps by taking a step away from just the raw data and the join conditions and the integrity conditions and so forth, you can come up with a new way of approaching a problem which just does a lot less work than the straightforward and obvious way of doing it. But of course, some of the examples are just, someone did this and it's just so incredibly wrong to do it that way, or so inefficient, or so such a simplistic way of doing things that there's an obvious better way of doing things. And some of them are just mistakes, of course. Mistakes which are relatively easy to make, but cost you a huge amount without you really noticing why it's costing you. So I think there's 8 or 9 examples in the 45 minutes I've got. Some of which I hope will entertain people, and some which will cause people to stop and think.
So you're presenting, right? You will be presenting a different approach from just going deep low-level tuning.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
About
Yes.
the problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Itself.
Yeah.
And not go directly deep into the wait events and
absolutely
blocks and so on.
Yes. Yes.
So defining the problem.
Yes.
At the top level.
Yes. I think it's important to understand and appreciate some of the sort of rocket science type stuff, or even mentioning wait events. That's not even rocket science. Some of the basic troubleshooting measures that you can look at, and then occasionally even to, as you might say, go into the rocket science, the switching up the machine level tracing and all the rest of it. It's good to be aware of and a little familiar with that stuff, so that you can prove that when you're looking at a problem, you can prove that your analysis of that problem is correct. And it's terribly easy to say, oh, I can see a lot of work going on here, therefore the problem must be X, right? But if you can't positively convince yourself that it's X, or if you don't have the background which says, oh, and yes, I can demonstrate it's X because I'll see this particular wait event, and on the instance statistics, that number will be about 20 times that number, and that number won't appear at all. Right? So if you've got some sort of familiarity with, if X is true, what does it mean? If some statistic shows up, that means X isn't true. You've got this sort of familiarity with what the numerical analysis means. That gives you the confidence then to say, okay, that's what I'm doing wrong. This is how we have to change this approach. So the low-level stuff is important, but really a huge number of problems can be resolved at a much higher level, just a much more sort of business-oriented or understanding the data, processing type oriented. When I say processing, I don't mean machine processing, I mean the business processing level. Which says, trivially, shall we say, if I want to view all the orders for a customer that they placed in the last 2 weeks, you could sit back and think, well, I could look at all that orders for that particular customer, but that spans 7 years, and that'll be a bit expensive. Then I can throw away all but the last 2 weeks. Or I can look at all the orders for the last 2 weeks and throw away everything that isn't that customer, but in a different way. That's an expensive way of doing it. Shouldn't I have an index which is customer ID, order date, if this happens to be a very popular query? And if it's not a very popular query, perhaps what I ought to be doing is go for all the orders in the last 2 weeks, because those orders are the orders which are most likely to be cached, and therefore, even though it's a bad way, or a low precision way of getting the data, it's the most resource-friendly way of getting the data because it's the least random scattered I/O, and that's currently my biggest threat. So just looking at that sort of high-level thinking about what's actually going on is where you've got to start. It's then nice to go underneath and say, oh yes, when I did it this way, I could see that I did 76,000 single block reads, which are randomly scattered all the way through the file, and there was this sort of time-dependent pattern when I was doing that. That's great, that's important, but it's the thing which you do second sometimes. You've got to do second because you can just look at the problem and say, well, it's obvious that I can think about what I'm trying to achieve before I worry too much about the fine detail of exactly what's going wrong. And a lot of the problems I solve are basically, I can see what you're doing wrong, okay? Now I'll go and show you the numbers that help you understand that I'm, my analysis, my diagnosis is correct. You've got to start with the diagnosis of, what are you trying to achieve? Why might you be doing that wrong incorrectly? Why is there an obvious way of doing it right and 25 obvious ways of doing it wrong? Right.
So if someone hires you as a tuning specialist, first of all, as I understand, you're trying to remember, trying to understand what they want to achieve, right?
Absolutely,
and,
yes.
Well, some people say that it's impossible to go to foreign system and look at the problem and understand it at the top level, and go directly to the huge execution plans and try to spot those low-level stuff. But as I understand what you told me, you should always try to understand what is going on at the top level, and have in the back of your head what is going on internally, just to verify your theory.
That I think is the better way round of doing things in general. Of course, if someone calls you in and says, I need you to tune up my system, they may not be able to give you any information about what they want you to tune up. So someone may simply say, the whole system is going slow, I've got no idea what's going on, it's just slow, make it go faster. And at that point, of course, you're really stuck because you have no idea what things need to go faster, and then you've got to start with the numbers. Unless you can go into the office and grab someone who looks important and say, hey, do you run queries on this machine? Do you run reports? And if they say yes, you can say, well, okay, got any problems? Are there any special reports that are really important and just take too long? If you can find someone to point you at important requirements, that gives you the edge in identifying what's going on and working downwards. But sometimes you do actually have to go in and simply say, well, okay, you're not telling me anything about where your problems are. You're not giving me any clues in terms of the business activity that's going on about your problems. In that case, I will just go and find where your resources are being spent in an extreme way and work effectively backwards, upwards, and say, well, this query is doing this much work, and it's actually something which returns only 55 rows, and it's not actually an aggregate query. It looks as if it ought to be picking up a couple of hundred rows and working through and discarding all but 55, but actually it's generating 46 billion rows, and then it's you just look at it backwards from the numbers. But mostly it's nicest if someone can say, well, what my business is, this is what I'm buying, this is what I'm selling, this is how I have a bulk load that comes in every 4 hours, these are the most important reports we run which happen every 15 minutes, and then you can say to them, okay, where do you see the worst impact? What do you think from a business perspective is behaving the most inefficiently, right? And sometimes, of course, the user will then say something like, well, this report's just a one-page report which I run every 15 minutes, but it takes 14 and a half minutes to run, right? And it's only really short. Why should it take so long? And you can trace that through, perhaps, and explain why it's taking 14 and a half minutes, because maybe it's necessary, right, because of what they're asking, or maybe it's the way they've asked it is extremely inefficient. But if you've got someone who can say, this is a process, this is really bad, my human perception of it is really bad, that at least gives you something where you can then say, well, let's follow this through and see whether it's reasonable. You may not like it, but maybe it's reasonable, or is it unreasonable, and we'll find out why. Right? Having intelligent input from the people who use the data is a huge benefit to getting them happiest, fastest. But sometimes you just have to do it by numbers, because no one can tell you specifically that something is wrong. Nothing stands out in the conversations you have about what the system does. Conversely, sometimes you walk in and they open their mouth, and after 3 sentences you think, I know what you've done. You've used this feature in that way, and you've done it wrong. And you just know. This happened to me many years ago. That I got called into a system, and it was actually the sort of vendor who had changed managers, and the new manager had gone in, and he'd called me because everything seemed to be terribly wrong. So he'd called me, and we met up at a motorway service station, sort of halfway between our houses, and he drove the rest of the way, telling me about the system. And before we even got there, I thought, I know what they've done wrong. They've done this. They haven't read this bit of the manual. They've done that, and now all their queries are bound to be slow because such and such doesn't happen. I got there, and something like an hour after I got there, I was sitting there thinking, okay, I'll give it a couple more hours because I don't want to. I don't want to say to them, I knew what you'd done wrong before I even got here, and it only took me 5 minutes, to, after I logged on to find out that I was right. So let me look at least as if it's a mistake, which took a little bit of time to find. But yeah, sometimes people describe what they've done, and you just know the sorts of mistakes they've made, and sometimes it's you look at a particular data structure and say, well, what does that look like? Or maybe it's a view definition, or maybe it's some indexing mechanisms, or something like this, or some feature. People use an Oracle feature, but they've used it badly. You look at people who've used partitioning, and the number of times you see partitioning, which is a dangerously high number of partitions, and then a global index. And they've created the partitions to break the data up into little bits because it's easier to manage, and then whacked on 45 massive global indexes, and they ask you why it takes so long to drop one partition, right? This is update problem. Okay, you're deleting 50 million rows from 45 massive indexes. And you can't really rebuild them, which you need to do at some stage because they're now in such a catastrophic mess because they're so big. But this sort of thing happens. Yeah.
I think I've seen already twice your speech doesn't do it.
Oh, right, okay.
And
there might be one or two new ones in there. I sort of slip in the new one and throw out an old one from time to time.
I'm still looking forward to it.
Oh, right.
And I know I will have fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, good.
One last question for you.
Yes.
What's your favorite character from Terry Pratchett's books?
A favourite character? Oh, you could have given me a warning on this one. I think Death is a very good character. It's either Commander Vimes or Death, and I think by just a short nose, Death wins probably. But I've not sat down and analysed it very, very closely. Mind you, Granny Weatherwax. Granny Weatherwax is I sometimes feel with the death of Terry Pratchett that perhaps Granny Weatherwax was Terry Pratchett's alter ego, and was the sort of basic bloody-minded common sense that she came across with, combined with the insight into human behaviour. It just seems so like the Terry Pratchett thing.
True.
Sad that he died the way he did. Which, of course, sort of got echoed in the last book where Granny Weatherwax, like all the witches, know when death is coming. Yeah. So, yes, good question to end on. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. Hope we will see again.
Oh, I'm
here
sure.
In Poland. I'm sure I will see you again.
Yes,
At least in Birmingham. Are you going to be in Croatia or Bulgaria?
No, I'm not doing those this year. Like I said, I'm cutting down my travel.
Yeah.
Right.